Yo mga kapatid, sinend lang pala sa akin tong video na to. Again, re-react na natin. Title, How has Israel survived Iran's deadly missile barrage? Okay, war update. And if you are watching me on TikTok, Lanslin, and sa YouTube, kung nanonood ka sa akin, Lanslin114, you can send me videos na pwede nating reactan. Kung gusto mo marinig opinion ko, mga napapanahong issue related sa games or Christian-related topics, comment down below. And in regards to this topic, no, actually maraming nag-hate na, hey, why if follow Israel, why ganito ganyan, lahat na lang kasalanan ng Israel, no? Mga kapatid, hindi ganon. Hindi natin alam. Yes, killing is bad, taking away another person is bad, but it doesn't mean na kumare may ginawa ka, you support Israel, kaya ito nangyayari kasi they support Israel. Mga kapatid, alisin natin yung mga pagiging gano'n nating mindset sa mga ganitong bagay, no? And yes, I'm going to even say this, no? Israel, chosen people of God, diba? Pero they have the religion Judaism na hindi naniniwala na Messiah si Jesus. So as far as I know about that, a lot of Jews really believe that, na okay, may Messiah, pero they believe na hindi yun si Jesus. And still, no, dito, yung topic, nakasurvive sila sa missile barrage. God is still protecting them, diba? And maybe, no, hindi natin alam kung paano kumikilos ang Panginoon, mga kapatid. And everything happens for a reason. Kung nasan ka man ngayon sa buhay mo, dati mayaman ka, ngayon naghihirap ka, or something like that, mga kapatid, hindi tumitigil ang Panginoon sa'yo. May purpose ang Panginoon sa'yo. Kung ano man na na-experience mo sa buhay mo, ano man pinagdadaanan mo sa life mo, laging may purpose ang Panginoon. Ang kailangan mo lang magkaroon ng pananampalataya sa Kanya. Okay? So, bago simulan na natin to. Lakas.
Hello and welcome to day 28 of the war with Iran. I'm Joshua Swanson.
Hello.
And this marks a full 4 weeks since the beginning of this conflict. So we decided to take a step back to look at what's unfolded so far and to focus on something remarkable.
Yeah,
miracles. Yes, even in the midst of war, there are powerful stories of God's hand at work, and we'll unpack some of those today. Joining us to unpack those miracles will be Jerusalem Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell. He'll break down the latest developments. Petite on the street, that's right, Middle East correspondent Paul Petite joins us from the Old City. And later, Prayer General and Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl will join us as well. As always, we invite you to join the conversation. Leave your questions and comments and prayer requests below. We'll do our best to respond to those and stand with you in prayer.
Let's go.
And actually, let's begin with a question.
Prayer request. Gusto ko pong doctor, please. Please.
From Johanna. Johanna's from Nigeria. And he asks a very interesting question. He says, what is the possibility that the Islamic Republic could be removed, and what would that mean in terms of doom for the Middle East? Very interesting word choice. We'll answer Johanna's question on the program today. But first, President Trump extended the deadline for attacks on Iran's energy sector by 10 days.
Okay. So, marami din nagsasabi, even sa work, dumb is so Trump. Badumts. Trump is so dumb. Ganito, ganyan. Kaya tayo naghihirap kasi ganito, man. Kapag kung magpo-focus lang lagi tayo sa mga negative aspects ng life natin, puputi lang yung buhok natin. So, sobrang daming nangyayaring kaguluhan sa mundo. Diba? Isipin nyo mga kapatid, like, ano pa ba? Like, may worse pa ba to? Diba? May mga nagsasabi na, papalapit na bumalik si Jesus. And I believe, hindi naman sa hindi ako naniniwala. Sinasabi ko lang yung facts na matagal lang sinasabi yan. Hindi pa ako pinapanganak. Mas laging malapit na. Pero ano bang yung tinatry ko sabihin dito mga kapatid? Hindi natin alam kung kailan darating, okay? It's maybe tomorrow, diba? Mamaya after ko mag-record dito, hindi ko na ito ma-post, diba? Mga kapatid, basta ang importante dito, importanteng tanong, ready ka ba? Diba? May oil ba yung lamp mo? Yun lang yun.
The extension allows the continuation of diplomatic talks between the U.S. and the Islamic Republic to end the war. Chris Mitchell reports on the latest from Jerusalem.
President Trump made the announcement on Truth Social. Let this statement serve to represent that I am positive.
Okay. Start tayo. Thank you for attention. Okay.
The period of energy plant destruction by 10 days to Monday, April 6, 2026 at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Talks are ongoing, and despite erroneous statements to the contrary by the fake news media and others, they are going very well. At Thursday's White House cabinet meeting, Trump described Iran's position.
They are begging to make a deal, not me. They're begging to make a deal. And anybody that saw what was happening over there would understand why they want to make a deal.
Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff said talks are moving
Very
forward
sassy,
with the
man.
government of Pakistan acting as a mediator.
I can report to you today that we have, along with your foreign policy team, presented a 15-point action list that forms the framework for a peace deal. This has been circulated through the Pakistani government, acting as the mediator. And this has resulted in strong and positive messaging in talks.
As part of those talks, Trump said Iran sent a gift of 8 oil tankers and then increased it to 10.
And I think they were Pakistani flagged. And I said, well, I guess we're dealing with the right people. And actually, they then apologized for something they said, and they said, we're going to send 2 more boats.
2 more
And
boats.
it ended up being 10 boats.
U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio warned about the nature of Iran's regime.
The people that run this country are radical Shia clerics. These are religious fanatics. Look what they are doing now. At their weakest point, this is the weakest Iran has ever been, and look at what they're doing. They're attacking embassies. They're attacking hotels. Imagine what these people would do if they had a nuclear weapon. That is an unacceptable risk for the world. By the way, the president's not just doing a favor to the United States and to our people. This is for the world.
And the U.S. and Israel are
Okay. So, kung naalala nyo sa mga past videos natin, ano ba dapat yung ginagawa ng isang government? Ano yung priority nila? Their people, of course. So, ikaw ba, Brother Lancelin, sinusuporta mo ba yung isang? No. I support the Philippines. Okay? So, anong mas makakabuti sa bansa natin? Okay. So, sa mga, alam nyo na, di ba, magbobotohan na, 2028. Isa sa pinaka-pangunahin na ayusin nyo, mga tatakbo dyan. Yung mga problema ng mga taxpayers. Sino ba yung mga karamihan na nagbabayad ng tax? Mga nagtatrabaho. And ano yung problema nila? Yung commute. Diba? Yung commute. Mga kapatid, grabe. Isipin nyo na lang, diba? Kaya may gano'n, kumari. From this, lugar, to kabila. Grabe yung difference ng pay. Siyempre, saan sila pupunta? Pupunta sila sa pinakamalaking pay kaya sa Manila. Kasi doon yung pinaka-worth it. Worth it sa 8 hours. Hindi kasi nag-adjust yung bilihin eh. Diba? So, isipin nyo mga kapatid, paano natin yan naayusin? Diba? Please lang. Kung hindi man maayos yung or ma-adjust yung pera, diba? Yung sahod, yung standard pay, standard salary sa isang lugar, paayos na lang ng commute, ha?
keeping up the military pressure. The Wall Street Journal reports the Pentagon is considering sending another 10,000 ground troops to the Middle East. And Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced that the IDF had taken out the head of Iran's Navy.
This man has a lot of blood on his hands, and he's also the one who led the closure of the Strait of Hormuz.
CENTCOM Commander Admiral Brad Cooper said the commander was a specially designated global terrorist. He also called on every Iranian serving in the IRGC Navy to immediately abandon their post and return home to avoid further risk of unnecessary injury or death. Meanwhile, in a sign of desperation, the Iranian regime launched a recruiting campaign to add 1 million fighters and lowered the draft age to 12 years old.
Mga batak yan sa COD. Magulat niya na may mga 12-year-olds nagbabani ha.
Leader and bureau chief to the program.
Or
Chris, President Trump says he wants to avoid a prolonged war in Iran and end this conflict in the coming weeks. Where do you think things are headed, and what will it take to bring this to a close?
Joshua, I think we're at a very pivotal crossroads right now, and it could go either way. As we just heard from Steve Witkoff in that report, positive results from the talks that are going on right now. Could this end with a diplomatic resolution between the Islamic regime and the U.S.
Sana
and Israel?
magmura ng gas.
That's one way it could end. The other way, if the talks fail, then there could be sort of a final blow by the U.S. and Israeli military. Some people are talking about maybe that U.S. Marine Amphibious Force, Expeditionary Force, going to take over Karg Island, which is sort of the economic lifeline for Iran. That's one possible scenario. And I would add, Joshua, the people here in Israel would rather not see this war end prematurely. They don't want to make sure, they want to make sure that the Islamic regime is finished once and for all, and it isn't able to resurrect in 6 months or a year or 2 years with ballistic missiles or a nuclear program. I assume that these 15 points, by the way,
Hindi mo rin masasabi, diba? Kasi syempre, people just don't easily accept defeat like that. Kung may magagawa sila ng paraan to do something, di ba? Para manaig sa isang war. Pero mga kapatid, walang panalo dito. Lahat, affected pati tayo because we're allied.
House and President
Or
Trump
source.
are very,
Source
very
din natin.
strong
Pinanggagalingan
and would
natin.
not allow those things to happen. But a crossroads right now. And Joshua, that's why a lot of people believe this is so important to be praying. Earlier today, I did a podcast with Rick Ridings, who is the co-founder of Sukkot
Smooth
Hillel,
promotion.
24/7 prayer ministry here in
Ako din.
Jerusalem. And it's really
Follow
a pivotal
me.
time to intercede
Like,
for
comment,
President
subscribe.
Trump, Prime Minister Netanyahu, for the people of Iran, that they could once again be free.
Yeah, agreed. Nobody here wants to go 3 rounds with Iran. 2 rounds has been plenty. As you know, Chris, we love to take questions from the audience. Johanna from Nigeria has an interesting question. He asks, what is the possibility that the Islamic Republic could be removed? And would that mean doom? That's right. He says the word doom for the Middle East. What are your thoughts, Chris?
Well, first of all, there is a possibility it could be removed, and that's why we're really at this crossroads. Iran has been pummeled for nearly 4 weeks now. Their infrastructure, the military command and control, the Bajis, that paramilitary group that really has been killing people on the streets. So it has been degraded dramatically. So there is a possibility of regime change. And if it did fall, I don't think it would be a doom. I think people say it would be a boon, meaning that it would be a blessing for the people of the Middle East. Not only Israel, but also you have the United Arab Emirates. You have Saudi Arabia advocating that President Trump not stop short of regime change. The ambassador for the UAE to the U.S. had an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, said a ceasefire is not enough. They want to make sure that Iran's nuclear program, ballistic missile program, its threat to international sea waters, all be eliminated. So I think...
Okay. So, I would agree on that. No? Pero mas mainam na it will be safe. No? Hindi yung, okay, ceasefire, okay, but what's next? Dapat let's make sure na hindi pa ito mag-i-spread all over the world, no? Kasi yung effects ng war for the last 4 weeks, damang-dama natin, mga kapatid. Grabe. Diba? And we're not even included in the war. Isipin nyo na lang, kapag yung mga weapons na yan, kung meron man sila or they get a hand of those types of deadlier weapons, na mahirap.
It would be a really blessing because it is a threat to the many nations in the region, including Israel.
Yeah. Chris, we wanted to take this episode since it's the end of the week and zoom out a little bit. So 4-week mark, as you just mentioned. What stands out so far as your biggest takeaway since this war began?
Oh, that the war's actually happening. I mean, this has been 47 years of a regime that's been threatening death to Israel, death to the U.S. There have been, I think, 7 presidents that had an opportunity to do what President Trump is doing. So we are living since February 28th.
No, I'm not supporting Trump, no. But if that's how it is, that's how it goes, then so be it. Kung hindi, alam mo yun, parang criticism siya, mga kapatid eh. Hanggat hindi mo tinatanggap yung criticism, masakit yan, of course. Kasi sino bang kinikritik, di ba? Ako makikritik ako. Tigil mo na yan, Brother Lansley, yung ginagawa mo. Wala namang nakikinig sa'yo, wala namang nagpa-follow sa'yo. Masakit sa akin yun. Di ba? Pero, bukod doon, kuwari may next pa siyang sinabi na, ganito kasi gawin mo, bro Lansley, para makapakinggan ka ng mga tao, para maging interested sila sa content na tinatry mong i-push. Masakit again at the umpisa. Pero may tinatry siyang ayusin, yun yung effect. And maybe the criticism of that comment sa akin, that person, is mag-bring pa ng help ng sobra sa channel na to. And the same thing with President Trump. Yes, damang-dama natin ito, but maybe in a good run, in the long run, I'm sorry. Maybe in the long run, we will be safe kung yun man yun. Kasi nakakatakot nga naman yung mga terrorist attacks, di ba? Yun yung ayoko kung mangyari kasi ano yung mga nakikilala mo, di ba? Yung mga bombahan dito, kaliwat kanan, di ba? Nakakalungkot yun. So, kung ito man yun for the peace, kung yun man yung purpose, okay, I don't want to overthink yung mga ganitong bagay, pero kung para sa peace, so be it. No? Mas maganda na mas tapos ito peacefully.
In biblical, prophetic, historic waters right now, already seeing a sea change in the Middle East. And that's why I think prayer is so important right now to see if this total change to the regime could happen. And as I said, my writings was telling me that if this regime falls, and this is how many people, many brothers and sisters, believers in Iran are praying, that it could be a boon for the gospel, not only throughout Iran, but the region.
That would be a miracle. Well, thank you, Chris,
Yes.
as always, for your insights, and Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
1 week ago, we were in this very broadcast on a Friday, a Shabbat, and the sirens went off, and we all took off for the shelters, as we were supposed to, of course, and boom. Now, we've heard interceptors before, but this was a really large boom, and as we came out of the shelters, we realized right away that something had hit in the old city. And yes, what you're seeing on your screen is the actual explosion that the IDF and the Israeli police captured. So some of this footage that you're seeing is us actually heading down there. I think we were down at the site within 30 minutes of the actual explosion. We went live on our Facebook page, which you can see that, which is a little bit chaotic. And now Paul Petit is there again. Paul, do we have you? There he is. Hey, Paul.
Now, the first full day of the war, I was in Tel Aviv covering the missile strike there. I want you to take a look at this crater. Look at the size of the crater, and as it tilts up, you can see the impact it made on the building. But it wasn't just that building.
Fake
it was all
news.
the buildings on either side of it. As a matter of fact, probably in about a block radius, there was glass blown everywhere. It was a lot of destruction. But yet, in all this, and I don't want to make light of it, one person did die, and nearly a dozen others were injured. But it could have been and should have been much worse than that. Then, the same day, another missile hit in Bet Shemesh, and I was there covering it as well the very day that it hit. This one struck a very large city. It's on the outskirts of Jerusalem, and this one was a direct hit. It hit a synagogue, and it destroyed it along with nearby buildings which people live in. These are homes. The hit was so direct on the synagogue that it heavily damaged its underground shelter as well. So far, still the most tragic of all disasters and missile strikes in Israel. 9 people died there, more than 40 people were injured, and the Bet Shemesh home is home, I should say, to more than 100,000 people. Very dense area, and it should have been, that missile, much worse than it was. Another miracle where it should have been much worse than the damage and the fatalities that resulted there. Then on to Tel Aviv again. This is just on the outskirts of the city. That one started shifting more to cluster bombs. Iran started shifting more to cluster bombs there. 2 workers died in that attack. That could have easily been avoided, but those 2 workers did not take shelter, and they were killed as being impacted by those cluster bombs. Again, this could have been avoided, but when you think about it, the cluster bombs, what they do, spreading munitions over miles and miles that could impact cars, metal, any kind of sheet metal, as you see in some of these holes here that I'm showing you, the death toll should have been much worse. I was there showing the damage, couldn't believe that, through all that, only 2 fatalities. And then just last Friday, just before this missile
You gotta
hit
still
in the old city,
look on the brighter side
population
of the
just under
fatalities lang,
200,000
isipin
people.
nyo.
A cluster bomb hit 8 different areas
I mean, it's still
across
bad.
the city. There's a lot of people that live there, yet through this, no fatalities, just injuries. You can see the damage the cluster bombs did. In fact, they set fire to some of the buildings there. I was again
I
covering
mean,
it,
I'm
talking to
not
some
laughing
neighbors.
sa
I spoke to one who
natawa
lived
lang
just a
ako na
few
parang
homes
grabe
down
capacitive,
from one home
no?
that was engulfed in flames. There were several injuries in this.
Like no
But when you look at the
fatalities.
widespread
Yeah,
damage
injury
that was
lang.
done,
Oh,
it should have
tanggal
been,
lang yung
and could
paa,
have been
mga
much
ganun,
worse.
di ba?
Again, God's hand in it. We call it a miracle.
Positive,
Miraculous
yes.
signs everywhere, despite the damage that was seen. Now,
Still a
fast forward
miracle,
again.
though.
This is now to Arad and Dimona. This happened just over the weekend. 2 missiles in a complex of apartments there. Again, a densely populated area, heavy damage, as you can see. And again, the death toll, 0 in all of this, somehow, some way. Now, the missile, here's another interesting part that is really God's hand. It's a miracle, is that the missile hit in between 4 different apartment buildings, not directly. So that made a huge difference in the impact that this missile could have had. Also, one of the other missiles hit the mud. It didn't hit a building. It didn't hit hard concrete because it had rained earlier in the week. And as a result of that, it more imploded than it did explode. And as a result of that, again, yes, there were more than 100 injuries. And again, we're not making light of it, but it could have been and should have been much worse. And Joshua, I could go on and on
Sinabi
about
naman,
how God's
we're
hand of
not
protection
making
has been throughout this war on areas throughout this country. As Chris mentioned just earlier, the goal of Iran is death to Israel, death to the Jews. And they're surely not seeing it at the rate they had hoped. Why? Yes, the Iron Dome's in place. More than 92% of all the missiles are...
Okay, so sabi niya, yun daw yung wini-wish ng Iran, no? And maraming nagsasabi, no? Even si Charlie Kirk, diba? Gawa natin ng content yan in the future na parang kahit Kristiyano sinasabi, no, deserve ni Charlie Kirk yung nangyari sa kanya. Ganyan, no? Bro, we don't celebrate death. May mga nagsasabi na no? Na hate yung Israel. Na parang ganito, wag niyong supportan to kasi they support Israel. And wag ganito, ganyan. And you hate Hitler. Like, hindi ko kayo maintindihan, guys. Make it make sense, ha? Make it make sense. Because Hitler killed Jews, diba? Maraming argument na nagsasabi na, ay, ganito lang naman, hundreds lang naman, thousands lang naman, millions. It's the same thing, ha? Tapos ngayon, nangyayari ulit, no? Nangyayari ulit ngayon, death to the Jews, no? Death to Israel. And daw. Tapos madami nagsasabi na wag suportahan yung Israel, suportahan yung alin pala, no? Hindi kasi maintindihan din eh. Tapos sasabihin na, I'm not like Hitler, you're... Bro.
Intercepted, but more than that, above that, is God's hand through it all. God's hand of protection upon the people of Israel, and we're seeing it every single day. Joshua?
Yeah, you're right, Paul. That number of missiles, I mean, just the data shows the number of missiles that struck and the very few deaths. It's a true miracle. Paul Petit, Middle East correspondent reporting from New York City. I want to remind our viewers that for over 20 years, CBN has beamed life-giving Farsi broadcasts into Iran despite internet shutdowns. Now, with war, of course, erupting across the country and civilians facing mass displacements and suffering, CBN Iran is ready to deliver prayer support, emergency food, humanitarian aid, and the hope of Jesus to families whose lives have been upended by the conflict. So CBN Iran as well as Operation Blessing are on the ground right now in Armenia preparing for what comes next, likely a humanitarian crisis or a refugee crisis. So if you'd like to participate in helping, there's a QR code right on your screen. You can shoot that with your phone. It'll take you to a landing page where you can participate. You can also scroll down below on YouTube and you'll find a donate button. Help us help the people of Iran. Now, many of these miracles have come down to inches, moments where a missile shifts just slightly, landing in a parking lot instead of striking an apartment building. We've seen explosions just outside of homes, and even footage of someone moving away from a window seconds before it shatters. There on the screen, you see the parking lot shot here. Check this out. Watch the explosion come through this window. That woman had just gotten up from her dinner table. What a miracle. Each of these moments may seem small on their own, but together they point to something much bigger. When you consider how few lives have been lost in what many feared could be an existential war for Israel, it's hard not to see the hand of God at work. Now I want to bring in Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl to give us her reflections on the miracles that you've seen since the beginning of this war. Welcome, Julie.
Thank you. I mean, you've said it. You and Paul and Chris talked about, it really has been a war full of miracles. I mean, the daily life here is just like slugging through mud and running to shelters and not sleeping and all of that. But, if you consider, like you said, the number of, and every
believe in
person
Jesus.
is important.
Of course.
Accept
represents
Jesus.
a loss. But, I mean,
the way,
could be hundreds
the truth,
of
and the life.
With the amount of firepower that Iran has been sending our way to Israel, it could be a whole lot more. Even injuries could be a whole lot more. I mean,
are they Jews?
Most of the injuries, not most, I can't say, but a lot of the injuries have been just people
I don't know.
falling on the way to
Sinend lang to sa akin.
So, I mean,
so kung interested pa kayo,
keeping things in perspective, that it really has been a miraculous
Just
time.
I mean, not to interrupt, if you think about those missiles being shot at London or any European city, you'd have a totally different result.
Yeah.
Israel, unfortunately, is prepared for this, and people are safer here, and of course, we have the Lord's covering.
Yeah. I mean, even if you just think about the missile in Iran, we talked about it, like if it would have smashed down a whole building, you would have a different body count right now.
Yeah.
But and speaking of Arad, one of the most precious miracle stories is of a 3-year-old little boy.
Yeah.
Who they couldn't find, but it turned out when the blast hit in Arad, he and his bed went out to the street 3 floors down, and landed, and he was basically safe. So that's quite an impressive story. Yonatan, you want to run that clip?
איזה נס קרה פה. תראו מה אומר כאן איחוד הצלה, איזה נס היה פה.
הגענו בדקות הראשונות אחרי האסון, ראינו כאן שוכב ילד על הרצפה, האבא מחפש אותו בקומה שלישית, הוא לא מוצא כולל המיטה והמזרון, והוא ישר בדק, אנחנו רואים את הילד למטה, פצוע קל.
נפל מקומה שלישית למטה עם המיטה וניצל. אין עוד מלבדו, השתבח שמו לעד.
That is unbelievable. The father's on the third floor looking around. Obviously, I'm sure in a panic.
Yeah.
Where's my kid? Where's my son? And
thinking the worst.
And he's 3 floors down on his mattress.
It's like God just removed him and set him down.
What a miracle. Well, and that is the point of this show, right? Is to zoom out and say,
Nakakatawa,
hey,
no?
look,
Nakakatawa
this is the war. It's awful. I wish it wasn't happening, but thank God for the miracles that have happened and for his covering. So, Julie, I wrote down a few prayer requests here because I want to turn to prayer. So several people have asked. Well, several people are saying that they're praying for us, which is a real blessing. But I want you to pray a covering over our bureau again, if you wouldn't mind. Lots of people are asking for prayer for a swift end of the war. Of course, we want that mostly for the people of Iran who are under this evil regime. And then also, several people asked us to pray for President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu. So would you mind?
I don't.
Julie?
Hey.
Okay, well, that's all for today.
I think that's all na din for us. Okay, no? So, mga kapatid, don't hate anything, don't hate anyone. Let's not limit ourselves sa mga choices na ginagawa natin, no? And we can see here sa video na to that even though they are at war, no, God is still protecting those people. And who's to say that they are bad, what they're doing is bad, no? Ang hirap i-judge niyan eh. Diba? And of course, maling pumatay, diba? Maling mag-murder. Diba? But who knows ano ba yung plano ng ating Panginoong Diyos sa kanila at sa mga dapat nilang gawin. Diba? So, ang suggestion ko sa inyo dito mga kapatid, let's pray about it. And kung ikaw na unbeliever na nakita ko tong video na to, hindi imposible and hindi aksidente na nakita mo tong video na to, and I hope that this video would push sa iyo, would give that push, konting push para mag-pursue ng relationship and tanggapin si Jesus as your Lord and Savior. Ito lang muna sa akin para sa ngayon mga kapatid. Kung nagustuhan nyo tong video na to, like, comment, subscribe, follow nyo rin ako sa TikTok. Ito lang muna sa akin para sa ngayon. Sa susunod ulit. Bye.